Okay, let's continue looking at Sergey Karjakin in the World Rapid Championship, which he did very well in. He managed to overtake Magnus Carlsen and win the World Rapid Championship. This was his game against Tkachiev. Okay, so who's 2644? So Sergey's 2779. So let's see how it panned out. So it's a 15-minute time control rapid with 10-second increment per move. Okay, so reasonable quality, but also excitement and much more decisive games than a normal kind of FIDE one game a day tournament. So I think FIDE are trying to maybe speed up the game, making it more entertaining for everyone, the general public. And for me, you know, it's nice to see a lot of wins there and a lot of blunders, but a lot of nice attacks. But the blunders kind of sometimes they make you know, the chess more fun, entertaining. But there's a balance obviously to be struck. So let's see, this is a Ruy Lopez, and okay, knight f6 after castles bishop e7 from Tkachiev. I'm gonna have trouble pronouncing that name. Okay, it's a TK, you know, like Tkachiev, maybe I'm gonna say that from now on, Tkachiev. That's catchy anyway. So c3 after castles rook e1. So this has already actually got, if we just rewind for a sec, d6, we're already venturing out sort of very quiet build up maybe, and often, you know, you'd see this in the Ruy Lopez, or this sometimes, eyeing these squares. So what one are we going to see? After h6 we see knight g3 actually, b5, and black sort of stretching out on the queen side, knight e7, and this is quite common manoeuvre to get the knights here. So they're sort of staring at each other. These two pairs of knights over here are now staring at each other, and they're looking at each other's sensitive points, you know, g4 and f4, which in turn look at all of the sensitive points virtually of each other's king side. But the other major difference, there's a bishop here, there isn't a bishop here. This bishop is kind of locked in by its own pawn here, this one locked in by that one. So how does the battle evolve from here? Well, b3 actually now. So is the bishop going to venture on this diagonal, but is it going to neglect the f4 square for a dangerous looking knight f4? Is that really the intended purpose, or is it to play something like c4 or a4 and leave the bishop here? So we're going to find out. After c5 actually d5, bishop d7, now a4, so that really looks like the intended purpose. The bishop is keeping an eye on f4 for that dangerous knight. Queen c7, and now h3 is ventured, so both are leaving that kind of pawn which could be potentially vulnerable to like bishop sacks on both sides, but at the moment, you know, with bishop on f8, that's not going to do anything to black's king side. Okay, black could try and play cheaply, but I think it's mostly pointless, because white will, if there's a bishop sack, white's going to have something like knight h2, or even just king h2 maybe, if there's a hint of queen c8, just protecting h3 with the king. So rook eb8, bishop e3. The black queen does move curiously though now, back to d8. So this is maintaining flexibility on both sides of the board. You know, maybe this knight's going to move, or knight g5 is going to be supported by the queen going back to d8. But we'll see. Queen d2 now, and you know, black's king is safe at the moment for bishop h6. Takes. So there's a b file now coming into the picture, and that's contested. One pair of rooks come off, keeping this rook. No, and of course if the rook wasn't there, then bishop a4. This rook, is it going to be evicted? Yes. Queen c1. It's a bit of a pain. Bishop d3 now. So queen a5. Okay, the queen commits to a5 now. Is it really going to be a problem with this pawn? Is black going to try and nick a pawn and queen? Is that the intention? Just generally putting a lot of pressure from there. Okay, knight d2. Evict the queen, maybe knight c4 and hit d6 at the same time. Bishop e7, bishop f1, so some quiet manoeuvring. Queen c2, strengthening e4. Now bishop d3. Knight goes back to g6. Now knight e2, guarding maybe f4 more. Knight e8, and now knight f3. So manoeuvring, knight h4, a pair of knights coming off. Okay. Queen c1, and it looks as though the pitch has changed. Maybe bishop h6 is on the cards now. And indeed, what was maybe before to be regarded as a very cheap resource for 5-minute games is actually the move chosen. Bishop takes h6. So why here? It's significantly different. There's a loose piece here on h4. Actually, I was having a friendly chat with Chess Explained earlier about loose pieces. I think he's going to do a few videos on. Sorry, I'm not. Sorry, I shouldn't spoil his video plans. No, sorry, forget what I've just said. No, but loose pieces. Okay, that's an interesting subject. Sorry, slip of the tongue there. But there's a loose piece on h4, and there is an expression. You know, loose pieces tend to fall off. I think so. John Nunn apparently made that expression. And is there a tendency for strong players, well, especially on the longer and longer time limits, not to have loose pieces? And maybe, you know, the best rapid players in this event are instinctively not going to have loose pieces. I mean, what loose pieces does White have here? Black has this loose piece, which is an excuse now for bishop h6. Because what is going to happen after bishop h6? You know, Black cannot take, queen h6. You know, c3 is guarded by the knight, so it's really a double attack. So Black plays now c4, which looks tactical and forcing. It gives c5 for the queen, which maybe f2. Maybe there's bishop f2 coming, and then g takes. So is this a trap that White has fallen into to play bishop h6? It looks dangerous if he hasn't taken account of this c4 move now. You know, is White's king going to be in trouble? White plays bishop c2 here. So we've got another, you know, dangerous forcing move, bishop f2 and queen c5 as an idea here. So what is going on now in this position? Can Black take on h6, or can he play queen c5? Well, actually, in this position he takes on h6. Maybe we should just get an engine evaluation of this position, because it's you know, it looks dangerous a little bit for both kings here. It seems both bishop f2 and g8-6, technically White's doing okay for both of them. Alright, let's turn that off now. And look, so takes. So Black plays bishop takes f2 check. And you might think, well, maybe there's an option for king h1 here. Does White have to take and allow queen c5? Well, it is a piece to get a piece back. So he does take, actually. You know, otherwise Black will defend that knight. It won't be two pieces attacked. So, you know, king f1 looks a little bit dodgy, perhaps. But he took it. So king takes f2. So we're equal again on material. Whoops. Bishop and knight each. This queen, though, is dangerously placed here. I'm too used to the ICC interface at the moment. I think I've got to get back to this interface for what's going on. It's actually Alt and then to get a highlight. Pardon me. So we've got pressure on f6 and d6 behind it. If the knight ever moved like this, then maybe, you know, knight g3 to h5 is pretty lethal for Black's king, or dangerous at least. No, knight e8 does defend g7. The knight actually went to h7, which allows d6 to drop off, and then also both of those pieces are attacked. Okay, so this is a kind of fun, exciting chess. And there's also no queen c5 check now, but there is queen b6 if Black wanted to get the queens off. But no, he plays rook b2, counter-attacking this bishop. White protects that. And now he snags that pawn with bishop takes a4. So, more simplification. And what do we have here? White has 5 pawns, black has 4 pawns. There seems to be a nasty pin on e2. This pawn looks particularly dangerous, potentially. White seems to have adequate defence if needed with rook e1 if things get really bad. He's also threatening, of course, e5. Okay, and he does take that e5. So queen b5 now. So white is 2 pawns up. Where's the compensation? King f3, queen b6. And now knight d4 looks like a powerful knight there. And it looks as though white's dominating this position now. Check. Looks like a very bad ending for black now. Rook a1. White's 2 pawns up. Rook b6, rook a4, and the c4 pawn's loose. Is he going to be 3 pawns up? Well, not taking immediately knight e5 would be embarrassing. Check, and winning the rook, so he doesn't do that. King f4, rook b2. It looks like plain sailing. G4, king g3, and now he takes on c4, and 3 pawns up. Check. Looks like a technique now, surely. King f4, king g5. It's safe enough there. d6, and finally this d pawn is going to be crowned into a queen. So knight e5. Okay, but get rid of knight d7 with king f6. And here, black resigned. The king's going to herd the pawn. So say knight d7, king e7. So here black resigned. Let's just get rid of those remaining moves there. So let's go back here and have a quick review of this game. So a kind of quiet build up in the centre, and both sides had these like pair of knights staring at each other here, and these like loose bits are about to be appearing for both sides soon. This a4, I mean this queenside business, did it expose white's a pawn or black's a pawn? Which was the more exposed a pawn out of this queenside action? So we can contrast, weaknesses of both sides. What was worse, h3 or h6? What was worse, a6 or a4? So it was an interesting battle here. Curious move, queen d8, keeping flexibility of the queen. Queen d2 kind of keeps flexibility of white's queen across both sides of the board potentially, if things clear up there. So both have the isolated a pawn. So basically a symmetrical pawn structure, with black invading first with rook b2. First pair of rooks come off. So here, I don't know, white has got the more advanced pawns. The pawn on d5 gives white the space advantage. This is the aggressive pawn in the position. And that confers like a cramping of this bishop behind the d6 pawn. So white has the space advantage regardless of the symmetrical pawn structure. So bishop d3 starting to pick on the isolated a pawn, and that's protected now with queen a5, which also hits white's isolated pawn and the pawn on c3. And we get some subtle manoeuvring. The bishop wants to come out of it, being a prisoner basically, maybe on this diagonal. So it's got that possibility. So there's some shuffling around of these pieces. But even the knights are restricted with this pawn on d6. Maybe a knight would have wanted to come to d6. So this is the space advantage. The d5 pawn is giving white the space advantage. So the knight h4. Okay, with this exchange, the minor piece imbalance is created, that white has the bishop pair, but the light square bishop isn't doing much because there's a lot of white square pawns. It's blocked in. But black's king safety slightly loosened and targeted with queen c1. That battery quite crude now. So what before was embarrassing maybe to consider, crude chess, it is actually, it's an effective move now in the position. And maybe, if you stuck this into an engine, you know, weakening the king with queen c1 is not mentioned. Actually, queen c1, it's a human move to try and weaken king safety in a way. And after knight f6 though, it probably is mentioned. Bishop h6 is a strong move. So if black treaded carefully with an accurate move like bishop c8 then apparently, then, you know, why is bishop h6 so terrible here? c4 takes queen d8, and it's nothing much. That's interesting. Okay, let's go back. So in the game, it's a good move here to play bishop h6, despite black's c4 resource. Okay, so c4 looks like a dangerous forcing move. Not sure what extent Sergey, unless we see the interview, to what extent he factored in c4 here. So this bishop takes f2. So he takes that to restore material and keep up some threats on f6 and indirectly d6 if the knight didn't move to e8. So taking that d6 pawn is really key here. It's the pawn chain being undermined, and white so not only got the space advantages but the extra pawn now. So this counterplay looks a little bit dangerous though. So white is forced into some defensive moves. So rook c1, okay, giving up a4 but getting some relief, you know, another exchange, and getting another centre pawn. So we've really got this d pawn and the use of the d4 square, because c4 conceded d4 positionally to white. King f3 is a very seemingly odd move, you know, not moving back. But if it moves to f1, you know it's going to be a target to this sort of thing, and then maybe rook b1. It's going to be an excuse for a check at some point. So moving to f3 is getting out of the way, in effect, of the a pawn advancing quite quickly. You could argue it's a tactical liability on the back row. So king f3 might be considered an instructive move, maybe. Knight d4, centralizing the knight beautifully, and the ending here, black had a few cheapos to avoid, but white is ultimately lots of pawns up. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube about this game? Thanks very much.